really extraordinary. Somebody I would have passed in the street just a few moments ago, not taken any notice of at all, has suddenly become, in the space of a few minutes and just a couple of articles of clothing, somebody who's really quite disconcertingly familiar.
It's February 2004 and Jesus is back. But this Jesus doesn't have 12 disciples, just 2 photographers. Michael Goff and Gary McElwain are taking pictures of their friend Barry, dressed as Jesus and unfortunately suffering from flu. Capturing the public's reaction to the Son of God on the streets of London.
The greatest reaction is no reaction, is to pretend he's not there.
If you're a Christian, this weekend is an important festival. But for the majority of people, Easter is about chocolate eggs, DIY, and for some reason, bunnies. No generation has ignored Jesus more, so I want to know, is his message dying out? That's what I intend to discover.
Cameron confessed to being a virgin. What's the confession? It's only a fact.
We are here this morning because Jesus Christ shed his blood to make all of this possible.
One mother wrote to me after her son died and said, "You were the friends who were never out."
I mean, do you love your neighbour? Which side of the house?
I want them to be taken through an experience. I want them to feel.
Do you think you can actually achieve anything by marching?
I think with God's power and God's love, we can achieve a lot, yeah.
This is an early example of Jesus Christ as superstar. Thousands of Victorians came to see Holman Hunt's The Light of the World. It's one of 2 copies that were made to satisfy the huge demand at the time, and the other one in fact went on a world tour that lasted more than 20 years. Even the Rolling Stones never matched that. But times have changed. Buddha is cool, Kabbalah is cool, Jesus isn't cool. But whether you're a believer or not, you can't fail to be impressed by the legacy of this preacher from the 1st century. It's all around you, in art, in the way our country's governed, in the phrases we use. Salt of the earth, that's one of his. And that's another. Let me explain where I'm coming from. Let me take you down memory lane. Well, the Harrow Road to be exact. To a place that pretty much made me what I am. So you can send your complaints here.
I first walked through those doors in 1953 at the tender age of 4. And for the next 16 years, this church became a major part of my life. And still is in many ways. It's amazing how some people can remember, if they support a particular football team, every single match and remember who was there, who scored. This church to me is, I can remember so many services and different events and things that happened in here, and I can almost remember the places I sat when they went on. Everything from the carol services to when I was baptised up the top there in 1968. The nice thing is they're all lovely memories too. Except for the one where Jane Augustine wouldn't go out with me. She was a year older than me in a Sunday school class above it. I've never really wanted to talk about it before, but... It was very interesting going to see the minister, Reverend Larkin, when I wanted to be baptised, because he said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, because I want to publicly show my faith and belief in Lord Jesus Christ." He said, "What other reason?" And I remember saying to him, "Because I'm a bit frightened." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, because I know I'm going to, as I do more and more work as a professional musician, I'm going to be moving away, and I'm going to be moving away from the area, moving away from the church, and I just feel it's perhaps a little bit of protection for me as well." The interesting thing was, moving away and going out with bands, there's not only the Bible that you can live by, but there was the good old rock and roll Bible, which was of a totally different nature. And that was quite an interesting book, and I lived by that quite a lot for a few years, which wasn't very clever. always felt, always, that God was looking over my shoulder going, never mind, I'll wait, with infinite patience. And he did.
Can I just say that this is not what South Harrow Baptist Church looks like on a Sunday morning? It's just an arty shot that the director liked. But in many churches, attendance is down. In the past 15 years, the number of bums on pews has dropped by 1 million. And that's a lot of bums. And if you want a snapshot of what has happened to the message of Jesus in Britain today, then you need look no further than to this man. Cyprian Yobera is a missionary, but a missionary to the English. Alarmed at what he'd heard about the state of the church in Britain, Cyprian came to work in Manchester, spreading the gospel. When he arrived, he soon realised that the Brits had some big gaps in their religious education.
Some of the people we talked to about Jesus in the very initial stages, who is that? And they've heard the name, but it's used as a swear word. There's even a kid who wondered why then Jesus would be named with a swear word if he was such a great guy,
It must have been so different from you, from some of the experiences of some of the Christian rallies, back in Kenya.
Yeah, you call them into a central place and you proclaim the message generally, and many of them do flock in. So,
when you say many of them, what sort of figures do you get?
Well, it depends. It depends on your method of advertising. Easily get 500,000 people come to a park. 500,000 people come to a park and listen to the message.
The irony of his situation is not lost on Cyprian. The country that brought him the faith he values so highly is now in need of his help.
There are so many missionaries that died in our nation bringing the gospel. Now, the gospel was that important to them, for them to risk their lives. I'm told of many that carried their belongings in a coffin because they were ready to die in the land that they were taking the message to. Coming back, we don't see that. We don't see that the gospel is in the center of people's lives here.
How would you describe it? How would you best describe the state of the church in this country?
The sort of pictures that I see in my head is like of a volcano that is dormant but active under the surface. And it's going to take a number of things happening and the volcano will erupt.
So is Cyprian right? Does the radical message of Jesus survive in Britain, or is it lost under a tide of chocolate eggs and indifference? This is what I aim to find out. I decided to test out the impact of Jesus' message. I hired a van with 2 of his best-known sayings on the side. Any idea who said that?
Jesus? Good man. Monty Python,
Excuse me, Gov. Any idea who said that?
Rik Wakeman, Pete Townsend, all the all-time greats.
Thank you very much. It's very kind. How I love my fans. In your own time.
Jesus.
Did you love your neighbour? Which side of the house?
And what's the thing about the meat? Because they will inherit the earth. It's enough to make you hate the meat, isn't it?
Excuse me. Hello. Could I ask you just to have a look at the sign and tell me if you recognise it or if you know where it came from or who said it?
Well, no, it wasn't there yesterday.
Thank you, that's quite correct. You've won the prize. Well, Jazz, as a sort of powerful advertising executive, you've come up with some slogans in your time. What do you think about these of Jesus here?
I think they're extremely powerful slogans. I think the impact that they would have had on the first people that heard them would have been somewhat life-changing, I'd have thought. Someone asks him a question, And rather than having to spend 3 weeks in development to come up with something, it's straight off the cuff, the prodigal son, the Good Samaritan. These are fantastic, creative stories. I think the church is sitting on some real treasure.
So, if the church is indeed sitting on treasure, what's it doing with it? This is the General Synod of the Church of England, where the top dog collars meet to make churchy-type decisions.
Strong and responsible leadership and proper structures of accountability.
Boy, is the day's agenda a gripping read.
When debate is concluded on item 503, the Synod will proceed to consider the measure clause by clause.
I don't want to get too apocalyptic about it.
I find it incomprehensible.
SO 55 brackets A close parenthesis.
What does it mean for the Church of England?
Clear?
Had to attempt some outline social analysis.
When debate is concluded on item 503, the Synod will proceed to consider the measure clause by clause, first considering any amendments of which due notice has been given, open parenthesis, 55 brackets A.
I bet they're off to collect tomorrow's paperwork. What I need is a friendly bishop to reassure me that in amongst all the bureaucracy, the Christian message is still in there somewhere.
As with many walks of life, not everybody understands all the things that have to go on behind the scenes, if you like, the plumbing of any organisation, in order to make the public bits work. If you don't have the plumbing, pretty soon there'll be a stink in the house, but you and I ordinarily don't want to have to think about that all the time. And in a sense, the Synod is the plumbing of the Church of England, and fair enough.
So where is the message of Jesus to be found in the church?
Fortunately, the message of Jesus today is to be found all over the place, both in the church and outside it. Yes, it's the big structures, yes, it's the Bible, yes, it's all of that, but often it's when we just get into an ordinary church, into an ordinary parish, and keep our ears open, that's when we start to hear what Jesus is really saying.
OK, I'll take up the bishop's challenge and test his theory. Here's a typical parish, Monmouth. It's been fought over in a tug of love between the Welsh and English for many centuries. At the moment, the Welsh have it. Isn't it lovely? But in a local school, a cruel interrogation is going on.
How about you? Why do we always have to pray in church? Why was divorce created? And how did the miracles happen?
Why did we have the church?
How can I make sure that I never lose my faith?
I've got the answer to that.
Why do you have to use a spoon to be baptised?
A spoon?
Why do people not like Christianity?
Well,
how can you love your enemies? It's really hard. What's a vicar and priest's biggest aim in life?
I don't know.
You can say that.
Bookworm then.
When you died, will you come back in another life?
Perhaps in another world religion they do believe that.
This is the very brave Reverend Val Powell, curate to 5 churches in Monmouth and occasional visitor to local schools, where she allows them to ask her anything about her faith and her job. So I'm going to have a go too.
You're not from round here, are you?
No, I'm not.
Where were you born then?
I was born originally in a 3-storey house in the middle of a little village in between a church and a jail. And it's said that when I was born I could have gone either way.
And which way did you go first of all then?
This was the answer.
So what happened to make that answer to move you more towards the church then than towards the jail?
It was unfortunate that as a child I was born with spina bifida, and I began having surgery at the age of 2. And I learned very quickly that you have to rely on something a lot more other than the here and now in order to get through each day. And for me, it was like a coming home when I went to church, and that's where it all sort of began.
Let us offer one another a sign of God's peace.
Without sounding twee, the truth is I believe that God's gift to me was life, and my gift to him is what I do with it.
Peace be with you, sir.
Whilst you're half the size of the lovely Dawn French, who I think is fantastic, you must have had the dreaded
All the time.
Vicar of Dibley thrown out. Well, I say dreaded because it's great, but you know.
All the time. Quite often, I remember particularly my brother's good friend said to my brother, "I think that Vicar of Dibley's a load of rubbish. Priests don't exist like that until I met your sister." And quite often I'll go off to do a funeral visit where, you know, people would say, "Oh, Mr. So-and-so would have been really happy that it was a young lady doing this."
Oh, that's nice.
Did you go to church on this Sunday?
This is Val's husband, Chris. At first it was hard for the Reverend and Mr. Powell to be serious for the BBC,
I've done it again. I'm sorry.
but eventually they settled down. Chris, apart from making Val laugh, is long-suffering and, surprisingly, an atheist.
Has any of the Christianity that Val preaches rubbed off on you at all?
I don't think it has, no.
That doesn't worry you?
I think that Chris very much sees this as a job and also sees my priesthood as part of who I am. Do you think that's fair to say?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. It's your thing, it's what you do to, I don't know, everybody has that thing that spins their wheel and that does it for you. You support your partner all the way, don't you, no matter what they choose to do, really. So.
What a special man there.
Indeed. I feel all emotional now.
Yeah.
You're never that nice to me. Now, chickens in a modern society get a bit of a rough deal, really. The poor little chicken has found itself becoming...
With fewer people in church on a Sunday, the modern priest has a tough job. Val has to divide her time between the more traditional side of the job.
Do this in remembrance of me.
I like the bit about the chickens.
The chickens.
And hitting the streets. All of Monmouth is Val's flock.
It's the queue.
This is the queue.
Oh, this is
Just
the queue.
standing here waiting.
Oh, you're right. I'll get in the queue.
I'll go
then.
see if...
The queue, I'm afraid, is about to get longer. Val came into the opticians to get her glasses fixed 5 months ago and has kept a pastoral eye on the staff ever since.
It's just nice to actually just come and be myself as a priest with you two.
Because we feel then we can talk to Val and tell her everything about her.
First treatment coming through the door as
Yeah,
well, mind.
she
Everything's
do.
dropped.
Yeah.
Val is on her way through.
Oh, that's really nice.
It is actually. I think we spent about an hour and a half here one day.
I did, yeah.
A cup of coffee and then it was like...
When you spend time with Val, you soon realise that the combination of her approach to people and the dog collar means you don't get anywhere very fast.
You was there at St Thomas's.
Be good, and if you can't be good,
be careful.
I'm keen to get on to meet an old boy who's been faithfully working away in one of Val's 5 churches for decades.
You're learning the piano, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay, I'll teach you an easy little piece.
Nice piece. And where does the easy fit into that?
That note there, because it hardly works.
Okay.
I'm glad that instead of the jail, Val headed for the church.
O Father Almighty.
Although, of course, in the end, she may well have converted the jail. The bishop was right. I did keep my ears open, and I did hear the message of Jesus. But that's a very Anglican way of doing things. Is there anyone out there making more of a noise?
It's Monday morning, and I'm off to church. You see, you can't keep a good Baptist away, or even a bad one.
Our government should not only be tough on war, but tough on the causes of war. Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fires signifies in the final sense...
It's 11 o'clock in the morning, and I've never seen so many students up so early.
The world in arms is not spending money alone.
I feel old.
The genius of its scientists, the hope of its children.
This is a student organisation called Speak, and they're about to hit the streets and demonstrate. Their target today is a Ministry of Defence department called Deso, which the students claim encourages the spread of the arms trade.
We will speak for peace. We will speak for justice. And this day we will shout. Thank you.
I got carried away. For a moment, I was a student again. I think I was distracted by seeing one in a suit. But I shouldn't patronise them. They are deadly serious.
Do you think you can actually achieve anything by marching?
I think with God's power and God's love, we can achieve a lot, yeah.
Ooh, Lord, ain't my trouble so hard. Ooh, Lord, ain't my trouble so hard.
They're marching to Deso, holding a service, and then they plan to hand in 600 daffodils, one for every Deso employee.
What we are actually doing here is a spiritual thing, and what we're doing is we're actually apologising to God and asking for strength to change our society as well. And we believe that we can't actually bring that change our own strength, we can't actually bring that revolutionary shift in society without actually coming before God and apologising, and it's Jesus that gives us that strength to change.
Ooh, Lord, trouble so hard. Ooh, Lord, trouble so hard. Don't nobody know my trouble but God. Don't nobody know my trouble but God.
This is the despised Deso. But they don't look like arms traders to me.
We pray for those crushed by human rights abuses. Show us how to break our own chains, which also connect to others.
500 Christians kneeling in prayer outside the Deso building can't be the most intimidating sight that London's seen over the last few years. But it can't be too comforting for the people who work in there to think that all these people really do care about what they're doing.
This demonstration is a delightful mixture of real conviction, Jesus' teaching, and good old-fashioned amateurism. On the coldest day of the year, street drama is not a good idea. Come to think of it, is street drama ever a good idea? Jesus seems to be at the heart of what they're doing here. A communion service, not in church, but in the street, has a special poignancy. I know most of London doesn't even know it's going on, but I'm glad it is. I told you it was cold.
Into the world, and we now present these flowers as an offering to you.
I reckon that this is a good training ground for future leaders. They'll learn from their mistakes, and you'll see these faces again. And chances are, then, they'll have more power and influence.
It feels... I don't know what it feels like.
The winner of Big Brother 2003, it's Cameron!
When Cameron Stout won Big Brother last year, we knew two things about him. He was from the Orkneys and he was a Christian. For a while he rivalled Cliff in the best-known Christian stakes. But a couple of things fascinated me about what happened to Cameron. The first was the press reaction. Because he was a Christian, he was an oddity, an eccentric, and more than that, an eccentric who was a virgin. I'll tell you what the second thing was in a minute, but first, what did he make of the press reaction?
What really makes me angry is how the press have to label somebody, and they think it's a scandal if somebody's a virgin or a Christian or whatever. To me, it's not such a big deal. It's a fact of life. You know, I absolutely hate the sensationalist nature of a lot of the press. I was really amused to see that they had said, you know, Cameron confessed to being a virgin. What's the confession? It's only a fact.
I bet you got a few letters after that one.
Plenty.
Yeah, offering to help you out.
That's all very smart, isn't it?
It is clever, isn't it?
Ooh, that's really cheesy.
Maybe we'll
come
use
into
it.
my parlour.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll use that.
The second thing about Cameron that interested me was the fact that despite the press, he won. The public liked a Christian best of all. How did he explain that?
Big Brother's a lot about how the public identifies with people on the telly, because you can't identify with celebrities and superstars and things. I think maybe people, once they realised that there was a certain normality to being a Christian, maybe they could identify, maybe they're seeking something, maybe, so obviously here was one aspect of my life that people sort of, not to say it's abnormal, but I think it was maybe a little bit not what they were expecting. I regard myself as plain old Cameron, but if people identify me in that way, I know I don't mind at all.
I reckon the 2 million people who voted for him might have had a sneaking admiration for plain old Cameron. Ask them to sing a hymn or go to church and they won't be interested. But if they see a normal bloke talking about Jesus in a normal way, that's quite appealing.
There's a man in Bradford who'd like to see so many Cameron Stouts that even the press wouldn't find him a novelty. His name is Paul Scanlon, and he's a bit controversial. Some people like his style and other people don't. I just like to see it for myself. The one thing you can say, though, is that his church is incredibly successful. So successful, in fact, that you might even find yourself going there.
It's 2 hours before their Sunday morning service, and I'm here for a guided tour of this very different church.
Hi, Rick.
Hello.
Good to meet you.
Good to see you.
Welcome to Abundant Life Church.
Thank you very much. Your reception area is about the size of most churches.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
My guide is Lara Martin, one of the church leaders. Since it started 30 years ago in a Bradford front room, the Abundant Life Church has outgrown a number of buildings.
I think about 10 staff.
This latest one is purpose-built.
So it's always good to have somewhere like people like yourself.
It's a long way from South Harrow Baptist.
To feel relaxed.
Hate to bring up the fiscal question. Is it paid for?
We actually raised £600,000 in one offering, which people just sold jewellery. One of the London tabloids rang us up saying, "We can't even believe that amount of money exists in the whole of the north of England."
Backstage at Abundant Life, it's just like being in a trendy, thriving company. And this is the managing director's office. The senior pastors.
You come with me.
You need a mat to go around here.
So this is our TV editing suite, as you can see. And this is just a tool to help get our message across. Because we always said, when Jesus lived, if they'd have had TV, if they'd have had internet, then I'm sure he would have used all those means. And we just think this is a great God-given tool so that not just the people in Bradford are reached, but the people in the whole world are reached.
Oh, just a small place.
This church is like a rock venue, and appropriately enough has its own well-rehearsed, highly professional band.
Nice to see you. Good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you, Rick.
This is the area I understand a little bit. Yeah, anything here that you do. Do you watch people when you're playing?
It's really inspiring, I think, when you look out into the crowd and you just see a sea of hands and people. It's an amazing sight to watch.
Have you had the odd granny freak out when you've started up?
No, we've got Gertrude. She's about 90 years old or something, and she's probably more active than the other ones.
Oh, really?
She's great.
When did you last see a queue to get into church? Today they're expecting about 1,500 people, and one special lady has just arrived.
So what do you make of all this?
Oh, I love it.
Do you?
I wouldn't like to be anywhere else, no.
Isn't it a little bit loud sometimes?
No, not for me.
No?
No, not for me.
So you love
it?
it?
When I'm in worship, I don't notice anything but God.
God bless you. Thanks ever. It's a pleasure to meet you, Gertrude. I'll let you get up because you're leading the dancing today, I think.
Oh, right, yes.
Yeah. All right, bless you. Thanks a lot.
Good to see you.
We are going to have an awesome day. This is the day the Lord has made, and we're going to rejoice, amen? So let's jump to our feet and let's worship.
I've been made rich by His love for me.
Watching people on TV doing this sort of thing always has the danger of looking a bit odd. But I have to say that when you're here, it's quite impressive. The Abundant Life Church has a strong American feel. I've been to many churches over there where God doesn't even make it into the car park, let alone the building. But I don't get that feeling here.
Let's get up on our feet and bring us Savior. showers praise our Savior. He's the Holy One I need forever. Nothing can compare to Jesus' love.
But the worship seems almost like the support for the main act. Most of the congregation are here to see this man, Paul Scanlon. I've got some questions for him. Why does everything have to be the best here? And where's Jesus in it all? But first, let's have a bit of him preaching.
And I look at this church this morning and I see black and white and young and old, and I see people that are wealthy sat next to people that are down and out. And we have not thrown money at this. It's not politically been arranged. It's just what God has done. You know, we are here this morning because Jesus Christ shed his blood to make all of this possible. Yes, we are.
If Michelin guides started to do churches, I would think 98% of them wouldn't even get 1 star. They walk in here, and I think you'd get 5 stars. What's your personal reason, your justification for doing that?
We are committed because we believe the Bible teaches that God is a God of excellence. We think those 2 ugly sisters of it'll do and good enough need kicking out the church, and we need to bring Cinderella from below stairs, which we think is that spirit of excellence that has been hidden for many generations in the church in our country, and we need to take her to the ball. Because when people see how beautiful the church is and can be and should be, not just in her message, but in her presentation, her style, her appearance, her values, her lifestyle. And we spend £250,000 a year right now in the inner city of Bradford on the poor. So that's why we don't feel bad that we are spending money on things that maybe could be spent on the poor, because we are reaching the poor as well. We're doing both.
You've got the best here. Jesus had very little. How do you reconcile the two?
Well, it depends on how you read the scriptures as to whether you think he had very little. I don't believe that Jesus and the disciples did have very little. When I read the Gospels as a businessman and put that head on, I think Jesus' operation was very effective because it was administered well, it was very financially successful. You know, Jesus' parents didn't stay in the inn, not because they couldn't afford to, but because it was full. His father was a self-employed businessman with a carpentry business and could afford to go to the inn. Otherwise, why go and ask him, do you have a room? We have wrongly made Jesus to be a pauper. Jesus was not driven by money, neither are we. And Paul's telling him stuff that we now...
Paul Scanlon is very much the face of Abundant Life. It's his vision for the church that drives it forward.
In our church, we have ex-offenders sat next to policemen. Please do not come to church in your uniform. You're going to spoil somebody's day. We think that a lot of the modern day businesses, a lot of the modern day coffee shop cultures have taken a very ancient product and have repackaged it in 21st century culture. But you're still drinking coffee when you're in those coffee shops. We feel the church can learn a lot from that, and that's really what we're trying to do here.
It begs the question, I mean, how big can you get?
This 2,000-seater that we are in here today already is too small for a number of things we are currently already doing. There is no limitation to, therefore, how big our church can become. If our church is for everybody that's not yet in our church, and I believe that most of our church isn't even here yet, isn't even in our church yet. We haven't even reached them yet.
Lord, if I should stumble, your hand won't let me fall.
I know what you're thinking. It's that old British suspicion of anything that's big and successful. But I like Paul Scanlon's openness. He makes no secret of seeing his church and the message of Jesus as a brand to be marketed. He truly believes in the product, so why shouldn't he?
Okay, so you must have thought to yourself by now, if he's really looking for evidence of the message of Jesus in Britain today, then why not just go to the cinema?
Alongside the famous faces on the hoardings promoting the latest films is that of the Son of God, or at least the actor Jim Caviezel playing the Son of God. Mel Gibson's $45 million epic on the last 12 hours of Jesus' life has been a huge hit in the States, taking over $300 million in just a month.
I want people to understand the reality of the story. I want them to be taken through an experience. I want them to feel.
But will the controversy that surrounds it obscure the message? Or has the film got a message at all? I wasn't prepared for such extreme violence. It's an uncomfortable, grueling experience.
Passion actually means suffering, and if suffering means violence, then Mel Gibson's done a great job here. I'm sure it's his intention that people should leave the cinema and go to church. I personally think they'd be more inclined to go to a bullfight.
This film is a bloody sermon from Mel Gibson, but to me, it's an incomplete one. It's like watching only one of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Most of the story and message of Jesus is missing. Admittedly, The Passion of the Christ has already done well here. It's #1 at the box office. But unlike the States, I think the British are going out of curiosity rather than devotion. And after all, we're the people that gave the world the life of Brian. I like my sermons from people rather than from films. Oxford, dreaming spires, etc., etc. But heading south, you soon leave the colleges and tourists behind and head into the real world of the Cowley Road. Bill Clinton took this route a couple of years ago. He was on his way to meet a remarkable, gutsy woman, and so am I.
When you meet her for the first time, you are struck by her presence. I think she has an enormous charisma.
The lady in question is a nun, but prepare to have your habit-wearing Sound of Music stereotype overturned. 22 years ago, Sister Frances Dominica founded the world's first children's hospice here in the grounds of her convent, offering respite care and a peaceful place to die. What she began here has been copied around the world.
It started back in 1978, really, when I had a telephone call from a young woman I didn't know who told me that her little 2-year-old was critically ill in hospital in Oxford. And we met and got to know each other well. And 6 months later, Helen's parents were told that there was no hope of her recovery. And so they knew that home was where she belonged. And eventually, I asked her parents if I could borrow her every now and again just to give them a little bit of a break. The concept of Helen House was just simply to be an alternative, if you like, to the extended family in a culture where the extended families almost cease to exist. Here we are, how can we help? And one mother wrote to me after her son died and said, "You were the friends who were never out."
Somebody who's never seen Helen House might say, "Oh, isn't it a sad place?"
My experience over the years has been that the families who come to us experience indescribable grief. But they also, all their sensitivities are heightened. They notice things they never noticed before, beauty and goodness and truth. Time becomes depth rather than length. You're living the present moment because you might not have the next moment.
40 years ago, Sister Frances had her life mapped out. A career in nursing, 5 children, and a perfect husband. But a dramatic realization that God wanted her to be a nun changed everything. In the early 60s, the life of a novice was strict and austere.
We had cells, not bedrooms, and the windows were so high that you couldn't see out. And there was an iron bedstead with a pretty well-used mattress, and a washstand with a jug and a bowl, and a chair and a prayer desk. And we had little ways of reminding ourselves of the relationship with God. Every time you passed a crucifix, you would bow. Every time you passed each other, you would bow. And if you passed the Mother Superior or a chaplain or somebody, you do a deep bow. And this was to remind, all these things were reminders that within that other person was God. Reminders that all the time, as we walk, as we talk, as we think, we need to be bringing them back to God, offering them to God, every moment of our lives.
The lives of many families have been improved as a result of that way of seeing the world. Alistair Craig, who has the degenerative illness muscular dystrophy, has been staying at Helen House on and off for the past 5 years, but is now too old for it. For young adults like Alistair, the only option to offer him and his family respite care is a home for the elderly. Step up, Sister Francis.
We tried quite hard to persuade other people to do something similar to Helen House for the next age group, and we didn't succeed. So finally we decided we'd better roll up our sleeves and start all over again.
So this is what Sister Francis can achieve when she rolls up her sleeves. Douglas House opened in February this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if she did the bricklaying herself. The architects consulted Alistair and some of his friends about what they wanted in Douglas House. Alistair asked for this music room, soundproofed so that he can play as loud as he likes. But today, we're just trying some gentle blues.
Yeah, we do.
You name the key.
I'm a guitarist, so let's make it E.
Alistair gave me a tour of Douglas House, starting with a surprise.
A bar? A bar. This was Rob's idea. They actually said it as a bit of a joke, but they took it seriously, and now we have it. And it's sponsored by a local brewery, so you don't even need to pay for the drink.
Free beer? I like it here.
So now we're going to go into the jacuzzi room. Hi.
Hello.
Hi. How are you doing? I'm fine, thanks.
Good, good.
It's a big jacuzzi too, mate. You enjoying the water? Is it good?
Is he awake?
I think he's asleep, yeah. I can understand that.
This is some we made earlier. Right.
Don't laugh, I'm doing my best here. And then, what do you do then?
We'll do another one around it.
That's really clever.
And here we have the sensory room.
Wow. This is amazing.
Yeah.
So you've got the music, the colours, the water. What's this here?
This is a waterbed, and it actually has speakers underneath it, so you can feel the music through it.
Wow.
So why don't you have a little lie down?
Yeah, there's nobody looking, is there? I'll get into trouble otherwise. Oh, this is fantastic.
I've learned many things about myself in the course of making this programme. That I have a hole in my shoe is just one of them.
So what do you think of it so far, then? Rick?
So why does Douglas House have a starfish as a logo?
It came about after a story that Sister Francis heard, and in it, a young man and an old man are walking along a beach, and there are lots of starfish washed up on the shore. And as they go along, the young man occasionally crouches down and he picks up a starfish and throws it back into the sea. And after a while, the old man asks him why he's doing it, and he says that he can't possibly make a difference. And the young man looks at a starfish that he's got in his hand, and he throws it out into the sea and says, it made a difference to that one. And that's kind of what Douglas House is really about.
That story perfectly sums up Sister Francis's work. Her belief learned as a novice that God is in each and every person. Yet both Helen House and Douglas House are not overtly religious places. The influence is here, but it's subtle.
Mostly in unspoken ways. We're trying to say, we want to walk alongside you, we want to offer friendship through this journey, this very, very lonely journey. But it's also saying death is not an end. Death, however excruciatingly painful, is a beginning. it seems it's impossible to believe that this person who's flesh of your flesh, bone of your bone, when they stop breathing, their heart stops beating, it can't be that they just stop existing. I do believe it's a little bit like the chrysalis and the butterfly, where the chrysalis is what we've known and loved and held and cherished. And then, for whatever reason, the chrysalis ceases to have a function and something new emerges, new life, the butterfly.
There are some places you visit that put your life and what you think are your problems into perspective, and that was one of them. I like my saints to be a mixture of the holy and the wholly human. Sister Frances is a true saint. Not that she would think so. It's a lovely romantic idea that Jesus once walks England's mountains green. No offence, Scotland and Wales, but I'm more concerned with the present. So, after all my travels, has his message survived, or have we gone and spoilt it all? Jesus is pretty irrelevant to many people in Britain. But what I've found is that his message is hanging on in there. And it's because of the strength of faith shown by people like those I've met in making this programme. These people make a big difference to those around them. I was particularly struck by something Sister Frances said to me. I'll let her have the last word.
We have a ceremony on Easter morning. The big Easter candle is carried in procession, and two people light small candles from the big candle and then pass it back to the next person, and they pass it to the next and to the next. And to me, that's Christian faith. It's passed, these little flickering light passed from one person to the next. And there's always a risk it'll get blown out, but somehow it hasn't through the centuries, has it? Light gives to light, gives to light, and faith goes on like that to the least deserving and least expected of us.
How about this for the end credits?
Do we have to pay you more for that?